set, but Alberta ain't ready to kneel just yet. They chose their king, their power was met, but we don't answer to Ottawa yet. No crown gave us what we've earned, just dirt and fire and lessons learned. Now the ground it shakes, the steel it groans, and Alberta walks alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. From the rigs to the rails, the crops to the code, we lit their streets, we bore their load. They laughed at pride, they mocked the West, but freedom don't die, it just waits for the test. The cowboys ride, the farmers rise, 5 million strong under open skies. No leash, no lie, no foreign throne. This land is steel and it stands alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. Can't kill the mountain, can't drown the plain, can't burn the spirit that won't be chained. He stares down.
Welcome at 7-Eleven Daily Summary with Bruce Show. I am so excited to be here with you. What an amazing time to be alive. Oh, can you feel it? I am on fire. I'm on fire. This is so exciting. All right, I have an exciting guest coming up. I am very thrilled to have the Colonel joining me, and we are going to be talking about some I don't know, you know what, there's so much to talk about. As I was talking to her just before we hit record, there is so much going on in the world, and especially in the United States, with the Orange Man. The Orange Man is Satan kind of guy. Yes, we love that guy. He is making some waves, and we love that about the United States and Mr. Trump. All right. As usual, I like to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to my circle of friends. Thank you to God for putting me here and putting me in this position. I also want to thank my friends and my family, and for the circumstances that have shaped me into the Unscrew the News dude. I also want to say thanks to nuggetstacker.com, a local business right here in Calgary. Get your gold and silver from nuggetstacker.com. You can go right through my website at unscrewthenews.com, click on the link and get yourself a discount. I do suggest that you protect your family's wealth with gold and silver. Get it in your hand, folks. They have a gold and silver subscription you might want to check out. Give them a call if you have any questions, 1-866-644-2121. They will not let you down. All right, we're going to get right into it and unscrew some news here. I'm coming to you from the heart of the battle-ready nation of Alberta. We bring you truth and optimism, Our goal is to break free from the media globalist mind control. It is December, the last month of 2025, December 2nd, 2025. This is episode number 229, and this is called Colonel Towner Watkins. I want to welcome the Colonel, retired USAF Colonel, dedicates their platform to uncovering the covert mechanisms of Operation Gladio and the international syndicate, linking historical NATO-backed false flag operations to modern intelligence manipulations and domestic control tactics. I want to welcome this highly decorated 30-year veteran to the show. Thank you so much for having taken the time to join me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invite.
I am excited to hear some more about you and what you're up to. Do you mind giving us a little bit of a background because you're new to all of us, and this is your first time being here, but do you mind giving us a little bit of a background on you?
Sure. I spent 30 years in the Air Force and went in the Air Force mainly to get a college education, and decided I liked it so much, I stuck around. And I've been assigned all over the world. I've traveled all over the world, and thought that after earning 6 different degrees that I was fairly well educated. Just for people to know me personally, I've always been an avid reader, and I have a collection prior to the last 3 years of about 600 different books, that mainly biographies. I only read nonfiction, and most of them were recommended reading throughout my Air Force career. And little did I know that most of the recommended reading that the Air Force provided for us for professional development was part of probably the programming is too strong of a word, but it was definitely indoctrination into, this is the real history. This is how things unfolded. And I spent a year getting a master's degree at Air War College in strategic studies, which basically is a look at the entire world. And it was divided up into sectors, which mirrored our combatant commanders. Like CENTCOM is the Middle East, PACOM is the Pacific, and EUCOM is Europe. And basically, during this year that we're there, you learn about historically all the wars that were fought there, what started the war, the resources that they have, and what type of government each country in that theater has. And so again, very well-rounded. And my area of expertise when I was at Air War College was Southeast Asia. I traveled there. I went to Thailand, I went to Japan, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and kind of retraced the footsteps of the Vietnam War. And again, thinking I had what the approved history was fairly well down. About 3 years ago, I stumbled across a trilogy written by Anthony Sutton that talked about the Wall Street. The names of the books are Wall Street and the Bolsheviks, Wall Street and Hitler, and Wall Street and FDR. And his argument is that basically all of those 3 entities were funded by the same people. And I have now come to call that entity that funds all of this stuff the international syndicate, because it is literally an international crime syndicate.
Right.
And it is made up of, and a lot of people like to throw out, it's all the Jewish people, or, it's all the bankers. It's all of them. There is an oligarchy that comprises this international syndicate of some very old money from families that most people never talk about. Like in the United States, you had the Whitney family, the Delanos, the Roosevelts, the Rockefellers, all of these people, JP Morgan, all of these people were basically carrying out a Fabian Society type operation. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Fabians, they basically coalesced in the late 1800s and decided that we're going to all have one world government. This one world government concept did not get created by the WEF. That's just the latest iteration of this operation. It was decided a long time ago. And weirdly enough, it was kind of, and you can see this playing out today, it was divided up into like a Pan America, where the US would lead that seat at the round table, and Pan Europe, Pan Asia. And remarkably enough, there was no Pan Africa. And there's a lot of conversation that is well documented as to why that was, because Africa had immense resources and a lot of people to enslave. And of course, we know all about the European colonies that had been set up in Africa. And supposedly in the late 1950s, early 60s, we decided to decolonize Africa, except for we didn't really do that.
Right.
You had governments that would be elected, and it was really selection. In the rare case where someone was elected that they didn't approve of, they would just go in and overthrow the government.
Right.
And
when you say they, you're talking about
the international
syndicate. Yeah.
Now, let me explain the cycle that works here. So this international syndicate sits up here, and they're literally the string pullers. The intelligence agencies that were created after World War II. Now, we always, the granddaddy is MI6, and that saying that all roads lead to London is very true. And so you have all of these intelligence agencies that pop up as a permanent fixture post-World War II. I refer to them as the Praetorian Guard for this oligarchy, the international syndicate. So if they decide that they want the resources in a particular country and the president of that country doesn't want to play along, they send in the Praetorian Guard, which is these intel agencies, to overthrow the government. Now, they only initially do it from the perspective of election interference, but many times the election interference didn't work out. The two best examples of that is in the Congo, when we went in and murdered Patrice Lumumba in 1961. At the time, the Congo had the world's largest supply known of uranium. And of course, in 1961, that's a vital resource because of nuclear weapons. But you also saw it manifest itself in Chile, in Salvador Allende. We also killed him. And that boiled down to the copper mines. There was a US company at the time called ITT, and they owned all of the telephone and telegraph capability in Chile, and PepsiCo. PepsiCo basically had a monopoly there. They went to Richard Nixon and said, hey, we don't like this guy. So they drastically interfered with the run-up. They had already sabotaged his campaign several years earlier so that he didn't even get the nomination. But in the lead up to him taking office in the early 1970s, there was a lot of, they bought an entire newspaper down there, which was basically the New York Times, under a proprietary company. That's kind of their front companies.
I see.
And so they're running a massive election interference network to make sure that he doesn't get elected. Well, he got elected. So then they moved to, it's a parliamentary type government where he had to be confirmed by the Senate down there. And then they started trying to buy senators. Well, that didn't work either. And so once he gets elected in office, he nationalizes the copper mine. And that was like the step too far.
Oh, yeah.
So they go to Richard Nixon and they actually offered him money. This has all been declassified to overthrow the government. And when they had a whole group of economists in Chicago that were basically doing economic warfare. And we see that playing out in Venezuela right now. But they decided that they were going to basically not allow any other ships to bring supplies into. They were starving the people. And there was such unrest in Chile leading up to the overthrow. They assassinated one of Salvador Allende's leading generals. And in his place, they put Pinochet, who goes on to be the military dictator of Chile once they kill Salvador Allende. And this type of operation plays out over and over again. In the 1950s, we had Iran, we had Guatemala, and there's over 90 successful coups that we've tracked around the world. Sometimes in countries, they've couped the government more than once. They've attempted hundreds of them. Some were successful, some were not. And this type of operation was done strictly to control resources. So if you look at the entire operation, you have these, if you go back in time, you've heard of the British East and West Indies Company.
Yeah.
The Netherlands had theirs, the Dutch and East and West Indies companies. Well, these were private companies that basically were given a letter of marque from the royal families to go out and conquer the world. And that's basically what we see today and throughout the post-World War II, but it's being done with government paid intelligence. So back in the day, these companies had to pay for their own private militaries. They also had to pay for their own private intelligence. Well, that's an expense account on their books. So after World War II, they came up with a brilliant idea that we're going to, in the United States, have a standing army for the first time ever.
Yes.
Like millions of people trained to go out and do whatever they want. We're also going to have a standing intelligence agency to go out and do covert operations. And so they're still working for this oligarch. If you look at the initial cadre of the CIA, they were Wall Street bankers, they were lawyers, they were economists. They are the exact same people that these entities, the international syndicate, had been paying off their own books. So what better way to shift them into this aggregate area, give them forever classification authority for national security, so none of their nefarious deeds ever get exposed,
right?
Which eventually they do. But you can see this playing out throughout our history. So now they've offshored the onto the taxpayers the expense of their private military and private intelligence. So we go through the entire Cold War doing all of this nefarious stuff. And I'll get back to that part because that's where Gladio comes in.
Yeah.
So you have all of this stuff embedded in the government. And after Desert Storm 1 in the early 1990s, but especially after Iraq 2, after 9/11, you see this explosion of private military and private intelligence companies. Well, a lot of them were created by former military people. Then they start consolidating. And obviously the most notorious one was Blackwater, who had a lot of CIA contracts, but he also had DOD contracts. And they're sending mercenaries all over to do contract killings. So now think about this. We're paying the CIA. They're paying private entities. Well, if you go back and you start looking at all these private military corporations, they're all owned by these people up here.
Right.
but they're paid for by our
by
tax dollars.
by our tax dollars. Yeah.
So if I have a Blackwater, which is now called Academy, and let's just say, I'm not saying it is, but let's just say, for example, it's owned in part by the Rockefeller family. They're now profiting off of our tax dollars and military dead bodies
Sure.
to their bottom line. So not only did they offload all of their expenses of the salaries of these people, they're now profiting off
They're
of
now
it.
profiting as well. That's insidious. Yeah.
So that's the cycle that basically explains the entire international syndicate and its control over almost everything. So once
can I interrupt you just for a second? I want to ask you something that's eating away at me as you're explaining all of this. But so I want you to get into Gladio, but can I just ask you, because as far as I can tell, I know I've heard it many, many, many times, but Ukraine 2014, totally color revolution, throw in a puppet. Is that correct?
Yes, but it didn't start there. If you go back to 2004, 2004 was the first coup in Ukraine.
I see.
So in 2004, the primarily ethnic Russian Eastern, where there's a lot of people that live, had voted in a president that they didn't like. And so basically what they did was create a groundswell of resistance using the Azov Battalion and Reich sector, which literally traces the roots back to post-World War II Nazi Germany.
Right.
And they decided unconstitutionally that they have like what is ranked choice voting is the best way to explain it, where they'll have all of these people run for office and then the top two compete against each other in a runoff if neither one of them got 50%. So they did that and the wrong guy got elected. So they decided that they're going to have riots, which we paid for. And then they coerced the Ukrainian government against its own constitution to have a third election.
Wow.
And and their guy, NATO's guy, gets elected in that third unconstitutional election. So then fast forward to 2014. Basically, the wrong guy got elected again. And this time they're pissed because these people keep voting the wrong way. And those people primarily lived in the Donbass region. And so post-election, with the NATO stooge in office after the Maidan coup, which primarily, and this is well-established fact, was carried off, the actual shooters was from Reich sector. And there's not a lot of difference between Reich sector and Azov Battalion, but they are different. They're both still Nazi-based. They literally trace their roots back to Bandera and Stetsko and all of the Nazis that mass murdered people in the immediate aftermath of, during World War II.
So you're saying that Ukraine might be a little bit dirty, is what you're saying.
It actually got better. We've all seen the photos of John McCain in the hotel there. That's the hotel that Reich sector was staying in. And they go up that hotel, down the buildings, and they're the snipers. They're the ones that killed everybody. But the story that was printed in the Mockingbird media was that was the government that did that, and he has to go.
Right.
What the New York Times at the beginning of, I want to say it was 2024, it may have been 2025, like in February, they actually wrote a long article, but they saved the best part for the bottom, which they always do. And it actually admits that in the immediate aftermath of 2014, the CIA set up underground networks along the region of the Donbass. And Ihor Kolomoisky, who came up in the Hunter Biden and the Joe Biden scandal, he was appointed governor of the area that's just next to the Donbass region. He immediately hires like the entire Azov battalion for security. And the CIA has several underground facilities to run intelligence for them and whatever else they were doing. And all at once, after the 2014 coup, they start killing people in the Donbass region. They assassinated 11 mayors. They were bombing schools, dance recitals, people's homes. And so there's just massive casualties everywhere of civilians, all being launched from Ukraine, where the CIA is.
Right.
And Vladimir Putin waits during all of that. I mean, there's lots of conversations going back and forth going, hey, there's Nazis here. Hey, there's Nazis over here. And hey, they're killing all these people. It's like an ethnic genocide going on because they're all ethnic Russians and they voted the wrong way.
Right. They were Russians. That was their crime, was they were Russians and they voted for the wrong people. And
Correct.
they couldn't control them, is what
Correct.
you're saying, right? Yeah.
Correct. And obviously, it's not until 8 years later that Putin decides to go in to protect those people and to denazify Ukraine, because Nazis, in their heart of hearts, because it was the Soviet Union, regardless of what anybody else says, and I'm not saying that everybody else didn't fight valiantly, but had the Soviet Union not crushed the German army, everybody in Europe would be speaking German.
Right.
And the people that trace their roots back to Hitler vehemently, to a degree most people can't comprehend, hate the Russians, because if it wasn't for the Russians, in their view, that Hitler would have won.
Right. Right.
So this traces back. And of course, you saw the interview with Tucker and Putin. He lays out this history masterfully, explaining how all of this unfolded. And I don't think most people can comprehend that level of hatred, but it's definitely there. And so the people that are currently in charge of Ukraine can't surrender, because they will be dead. These Nazis are trained assassins. They know their life will immediately end. And so you have a real issue here of how many dead bodies are going to be offered up in Ukraine, because they have no way of winning. They've never controlled the air. They've never controlled the ground. And you cannot win a war if you don't control the air and the ground. You just can't. That's fundamental math.
Wow.
So let's shoot back to
Gladio. Do you want to go to Gladio? I'm going to break this up here just for 1 second, because I want to share something, and I think you'll like what I'm going to share. So stand by. And there we have it.
Yeah.
I thought that would just be fun to share for a second. All right. I'm going to take that off, and then you're going to talk about Gladio.
Very appropriate. So in the aftermath, well, even before the war was over, there's a secret meeting in northern Italy between a guy by the name of General Wolf, who basically ran stay behind units, which is another name for Gladio, in Hitler's military. And he did so on the Eastern Front with Reinhard Gehlen, who, weirdly enough, as a Nazi, goes on to be the German BND chief, who the German BND is the counterpart to our CIA. So how did the guy in denazified Germany hire a Nazi to be in charge of their intelligence organization? Well, the way that happened was this secret meeting. General Wolf knew, when this meeting happened in northern Italy with Alan Dulles and a 2-star military general by the name of Lyman Lemitsker, that they were going to lose the war. So his terms presented to Alan Dulles was, if I give you our stay behind network, and a stay behind network was a group of about 20 people that appeared to be civilians, but had been trained to be assassins, to kill. They had explosives, they had guns, they had money, they had communication equipment, and could be activated. And the thought was that we're planting these stay behind units as we move forward into Russia, so that if we get pushed back, that the stay behind units can be activated and attack from the rear.
Right.
Most of them were annihilated, but these weapon caches were still buried all over. And there was still a skeleton network left. So General Wolf says, I will give you all of the plans that show you where all of this stuff is. Our deal is that we have a list of people that have to be saved. Reinhard Gehlen was on that list. Otto Skorzeny was on that list. A whole laundry list of people were on that list. And that's the reason why anybody that talks about Nuremberg and thinking that was a legit thing that happened is full of crap. Nuremberg.
Hold on. You're now exposing something new, like we talked about at the beginning. You're telling me something like Nuremberg was a show trial?
It was.
Yeah.
So we're going to put these people on trial.
Yes.
Otto Skorzeny was one of the people, but he was found not guilty. And weirdly enough, if you start looking into who was the prosecutor and the judges and stuff like that, they have a really weird tie to Dallas, Texas, which comes up in the JFK assassination. A lot of the same players, weirdly enough. But anyway, basically it was, you're going to be able to hang these few people. We're going to sentence all of these people to death, but then we're not going to actually kill them. And after no one was looking anymore, their death penalties was commuted to life imprisonment, which was then commuted to time served, and they all were released. But there was a whole laundry list of the people that escaped Nuremberg altogether, which is weird since they were all in prison camps manned by the military. Somehow they escaped and were rat-lined using Catholic churches and dressed up as priests out and primarily through Spain into Argentina and then dispersed all over Latin America. That comes up later in Gladio's cousin called Operation Condor, which we'll talk about later. So now we have all of these stay behind units, and some of which were still located in what is now going to be the Soviet Union, because, you know, they took Hungary and Romania and all of those, and they had stay behind units in them. So the Soviets immediately start rooting these people out because their intelligence told them that they were there. And so in Europe, NATO gets created. And in NATO, there were two entities. One was called the CPC, Clandestine Planning Committee, and the ACC, Allied Clandestine Committee. These two committees ran the Gladio networks in Europe, because part of the deal when Reinhard Gehlen gets dressed up in a U.S. Army general's uniform and flown into Washington, D.C. to be debriefed on how he set the whole thing up, they decide that they're going to embed this stay behind capability in all of the NATO countries.
Wow.
And they're called different things. Like in Portugal, it was called Agenter Press. In Turkey, it was called the Grey Wolves. So they had different names. In Italy, it was called Gladio. And the reason why it now is generically referred to, the entire network is referred to as Gladio, is because Italy was the only country to ever actually do a real investigation and admit that they had it. With the investigation, a couple others said, oh yeah, we have it, but we've never done anything with it. And we're just going to let it go away. So what was originally set up as the stay behind networks to fight the communists, which was done in the immediate aftermath of World War II, after 25 million Soviets had been killed on the battlefield and wasn't really a threat. So why are we telling everybody in the United States and everywhere else that the Soviet Union's going to run over the Volga Gap any minute when there was hardly any of them left? Right. And so that was the key word that they always used was anti-communist. And they come up with the World Anti-Communist League, the Asian People's Communist League. This thing just mushroomed all over the world. And there, you find stay-behind units everywhere. Everywhere that we have fought or overthrew a government, there's been stay-behind units. They created stay-behind units in the early 50s in Iran, in the South, among the tribal people, just before they overthrew Mossadegh in 1953, I think it was.
Colonel,
So,
can I interrupt you for another second? Because I want to make sure that everybody's still on board and understanding, because you've got a lot of information, and some of it still, is new to me as well. So I'm trying to keep a handle on it. So these stay behind networks, can you just give us a brief idea? So are they like the Jason Bournes of the movies? Are they in their clandestine, just fit into the normal lives, and
yes.
they'll be called up whenever they're
Yes.
needed? Okay.
Yes. So they originally in Germany were called werewolf units, maybe after General Wolf, but the analogy that they gave was that they were citizens by day and killers by night, like a werewolf.
Yeah.
Like they morph into killers. And so again, they were justified as, we need them all over Europe. You had them in Norway, Sweden, and they weren't even part of NATO, but they were everywhere in Europe.
And so NATO's pulling the strings on this, or
100%. They were having
international
quarterly meetings.
Yeah. Okay. So NATO is now sort of the bureaucratic head of this international syndicate
hub.
now. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So when Daniel Ganser wrote a book called NATO Secret Army, and in his book, he says that every NATO country had to sign a secret agreement to have these stay behind units in it. So that was one of the first books I read about Gladio 3 years ago. And it took me about a year sitting out in my backyard, and I went, holy shit, we're in NATO. Who's our stay behind units?
Right.
What the heck? So I'll get to that in a second. So all of these units under the guise of anti-communism was set up all over Europe. There was hundreds of them in Italy. So they have these buried caches of weapons, and these cells are about 20 people. Well, they were taken to special training locations. Otto Skorzeny ends up, after his trial at Nuremberg, NATO was originally set up in Paris.
Okay.
So he gets moved to Paris because he's going to be the trainer, because he's the one that trained all of the stay-behinds on the Eastern Front for Reinhard Gehlen. So Reinhard Gehlen is now running the Gehlen organization, which morphs into the BND, which is their CIA in West Germany. So Reinhard Gehlen is working with Otto Skorzeny. Otto Skorzeny is now going to be the trainer for these Gladio units. So he sets up some training sites because he has this big scar on his face, and he immediately gets recognized in Paris. So they take him and put him in Franco's fascist Spain. And he hangs out in Madrid, and he sets up all of these terrorist training camps for these Gladio assassins. And on the island of Sardinia, off the coast of Italy, that's where they were teaching them how to kidnap people. In the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa, they were teaching them how to do water operations. So they have, like, it's literally like what you would refer to in the U.S. military as like JSOC, where you have all of these special operations people being trained in all of these different terrains to conduct operations in all of these countries. And so, again, all of this gets exposed. Paul Williams wrote a book called Operation Gladio. It's a must read. And all of this gets explained. So they're left with a dilemma after they get all of these units identified and they start setting them up. How are we going to pay for them? Well, initially, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Marshall Plan had a covert line in it where they were funding this operation. Now they know the Marshall Plan is going to go away at some point. So we've got to have another covert funding source.
Yeah.
Well, in Asia, during World War II, you have the OSS in bed with the nationalist Chinese, like Chiang Kai-shek, and the KMT army. Well, they're notorious for being opium traffickers. And the US wanted Chiang Kai-shek to defeat Mao because, he's communist. We don't like that. Okay. So after the war ends, you have a continued presence of the CIA still fighting this battle. Eventually, Chiang Kai-shek loses to Mao, obviously, and the CIA helps him move to Burma to continue opium trafficking, because one of the military assistants to Chiang Kai-shek when he was still in China during the war was a Colonel Paul Helliwell. Colonel Paul Helliwell contacts Alan Dulles and he says, hey, that stay behind thing that you're going to set up? Why don't we just fund it with illicit, covert drug trafficking?
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's the perfect thing. It generates billions of dollars. We're going to have all this money. So Chiang Kai-shek is their cash cow. So they have to protect him. They relocate him to Burma. The Burmese government, there's a lot of crap going on in northern Burma. They don't like what's going on. So they eventually kick the KMT army out. And they're looking around for another place to set up Chiang Kai-shek. So there's this island over here off of China that's a Chinese island called Formosa. And there's actually a chain of islands. It's not just Formosa. There's several other islands, like 7 other islands. I did not know this at the time or in any of my education, that when they picked Chiang Kai-shek up and moved him over to Formosa, they just turned the island sign and started calling it Taiwan.
Oh, my.
So now you have the largest supplier of opium in the world as the president of Taiwan. And one of his first acts, because the Formosans, who had just survived awful World War II and was finally getting their lives back together, was like, no, we don't want a drug lord here. And we don't want him as our president. We're supposed to be free now.
Right.
So they start fighting back against the CIA and the KMT army that has accompanied Chiang Kai-shek to Taiwan. And Chiang Kai-shek immediately declares martial law. And for almost the next 40 years, while MacArthur is in front of Congress testifying that it's a thriving democracy, they lived under martial law for almost 40 years with him as a military dictator.
Wow.
Yeah. I, again, having read all kinds of history, had no idea that was true.
Jeez.
It is not until the 70s and 80s that the things changed.
Yeah, the KMT. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, that became a political party. And you wouldn't find it at all odd, since they just changed the shingle on the KMT from being an assassin army to a military party or a political party, that Taiwan also hosts a thing called the Political Warfare Cadre Academy. And what they teach at that Political Warfare Cadre Academy is how to take basically assassin squads, put a political party name on them, and anytime that anyone from the outside of the country attacks that particular death squad assassin entity, you're attacking democracy.
Right.
Because it's now a political party.
Right.
And that philosophy came from Chiang Kai-shek and his Political Warfare Cadre Academy. And weirdly enough, since we've talked about Gladio and we can go into some of the, so the whole purpose of having Gladio in Europe was to control the people, not to fight communism. So what you find is throughout Europe, there's all of these terror attacks domestically. And like the shooting of John Paul II.
Right.
That eventually, the two guys that was arrested for that were gray wolves from Turkey.
Really?
Yes. So they have a train station bombing, they have a bank bombing. There's hundreds of people that are killed in Italy. And all of those attacks were blamed on this communist faction called the Red Brigade, only to find out none of them were actually committed by Red Brigade members. They were all committed by Gladio. And every time there was a political issue or people were kind of leaning towards unionization or any of these far left things, all they did was schedule another terror attack. And then people looked to the government for solutions and safety.
Wow.
So the entire thing was manipulated. And they had one of the guys, whose name I'm not going to remember, but Mate or something like that, who was in charge of the natural gas and oil for the country of Italy. He flies to Libya, and he's renegotiating a contract with them, and he's going to up the percentage that Libya is allowed to keep of their oil. Well, his aircraft blows up on his way back, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
And it's immediately, oh, it was just an accident, something went wrong with the aircraft. They end up, once they find out about Gladio in 1990 in Italy, they dig this man's body up, and his ring, which is made of gold that he was buried with, had fragments of explosives in it.
Okay.
And they determined that he was murdered.
Right.
So the other aspect of this, so now we've got illicit drugs being shipped everywhere. What are we going to do with all the money? Well, they decided that initially they were going to use the Vatican Bank, because where else would you launder, billions?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a sovereign within a sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
The actual bank of, and I didn't know that either, but it's in its own sovereignty within the sovereignty of the Vatican. So we're going to use the Vatican Bank. Well, very shortly, the amount of money being generated illicitly through selling drugs. Oh, and they're going to sell arms too. Because if you're going to have all of these units, you have to buy, you have to buy rifles and equipment. Okay, so we're going to start creating fake banks. And
Fake banks?
Fake banks. So they're going to look like a bank, and they're going to function like a bank, but they're 100% a proprietary of the CIA.
I see.
One of them is called the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. It was originally created by a guy from Pakistan who had a bank in Pakistan, but it was never actually headquartered in Pakistan. You'll read stuff and it'll say, oh yeah, that was a Pakistani bank, but it really wasn't. It was incorporated in Luxembourg and ran out of the city of London.
Okay.
And so Betty was the name of the guy that did it. And it operated for like 20 years. Within a few years, they were laundering so much money, it became the 7th largest bank in the world.
Oh my gosh.
It had branches literally everywhere. You also had another one in Australia called Nugent Han. And weirdly enough, the lawyer for a bank in Australia was a guy that ends up being the CIA director. Weird. Yeah. And the hand part of Nugent Han was a Green Beret. He was a major who had been in Vietnam. And so basically these two banks, one was laundering like the Golden Crescent money. That was BCCI, with Saudi Arabia and UAE right in the middle of it. And then you had Nugent Han in Australia that was basically doing the East Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Laos drug network. And they operated, depending on which one you're talking about, approximately 20 years. And everybody knew at the time on the inside,
Yeah.
like DEA, the FBI, the CIA, because they were behind both of them, that this was going on. The National Security Council knew about it. The State Department knew about it. But you find in most of these countries that we will eventually overthrow, the same ambassadors start showing up in country after country after country. And the same CIA agents happen to be, oh, he's just the covert guy at this CIA when we overthrow this government, but then he's the station chief when you get to this country that we're going to overthrow. So when you're doing this research, all of these same names keep coming up over and over again. And it just became almost like an addiction, because as the more you look into it, the more things that are tied to it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a vast well of knowledge, and this sounds like it's going to continue on for a long time. And it sounds like we have to have episode 2 and 3 at least to scratch the surface on all of the information. I want to make sure that everybody knows that you also do spaces on X Monday to Friday. Is that what you said?
Yes, at 4 p.m. East Coast time.
Monday to Friday, East Coast time, 4 p.m. But I want to ask you a couple of the things before we end off here, if that's okay. I'm going to bring something up here just to break this up just one more time here. One moment. Oops, hang on. Where did you go? There you are. I thought this was an interesting post today from Nick Sorter, and you probably follow Nick Sorter, but President Trump just advised anyone who received unauthorized auto pen pardon or commutation from Biden White House that this action is now officially null and void. I love it. Love seeing this information.
Yeah.
I want to, before we end off, and I don't know if you want to say anything about this particular post, but I wanted to ask you about Venezuela before we finish off here. Do you want to say anything quickly about this?
Just for people's knowledge, when I was stationed at the Pentagon for 4 years, and every general officer has the capability of an auto pen. When I was a wing commander in my last job, I had thousands of people in my command, and you just physically can't sign everything.
Of course.
So there are things that are allowed to be auto penned, and there is a process for you to authorize particular things to be auto penned. It is never anything that is not completely documented as far as what you're authorized to auto pen, what you're not. They call it a wet signature when you actually have to sign the document. And like pardons, you need to actually have a signature on there, not an auto pen, because they are, literally certifying that they've reviewed all of the documentation of the pardon and they agree with it. Pardons were never, ever allowed to be auto penned. And there's a log that has to be maintained of what exact document it is. So it is one of the most micromanaged, because I had to do it for the general that I worked for. It is one of the most micromanaged processes in the military and in government overall. So yeah, that was definitely going to happen. There's no way you're allowed to auto pen pardons.
The willy-nilliness of what we've heard should hopefully be coming out, and we can see how insane it really was the last 4 years. I'm sure that you're still reeling from the last 4 years. Okay, I wanted to ask you about Venezuela, because you said that you'd be able to talk about it, or you said you'd be interested.
Sure.
I want to know what is going on with Venezuela and what your take is on it, because I don't believe, and I don't think that most people believe, that it's just about the drugs.
So interestingly enough, there's a lot of things that are interconnected. Most of what you hear on the news is absolutely not true. The Cartel of the Sun, Cartel del Sol, was actually created by the CIA.
Sure it
And
was.
everybody will go, what? So back in the day, there was, it's so hard to, so there is under USAID, there was an office called the Office of Public Safety. Well, just like all of our laws, the Affordable Care Act that wasn't affordable, the
Yes.
Patriot Act that was anti-patriot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Office of Public Safety is that exact same thing. They basically was an entity under USAID that taught former cops in the United States embedded with CIA, pretending to be former cops in the United States, to kidnap, torture, and execute people.
Oh my God.
Yes, under the Office of Public Safety. You can find this. It's all out there. The Office of Public Safety was intimately involved in Pinochet's Chile. We talked about them. They were in Brazil, Paraguay. If you want to look up somebody that worked for them, look up Dan Mederone. He was a retired police chief from Richmond, Indiana. He went down to Uruguay, was teaching people how to assassinate people, torture people. He had actually tortured people in the basement of the house that he had down there. They were shipping electrodes to electrocute people as part of the torture in State Department pouches knowingly. It's a big, horrendous thing. Well, obviously, one of the first things I do anytime one of these countries come up on the radar, I go back and search for things like Office of Public Safety, USAID, National Endowment for Democracy is another one, the Institute of Peace, all of these. So weirdly enough, Office of Public Safety was in Venezuela. The CIA set up this whole national police force. They had the two generals in charge of it, which they wore the sun insignia on their uniform, which is where Cartel de la Sol comes from. Cartel of the Sun was from that emblem that they wore on their uniform. So the CIA was basically in charge of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you will find out, and I believe that Trump and Maduro, I'm not going to say they're working together, but I'm going to say that there has been a lot more dialogue than what we know about.
Right.
And that Venezuela has had USAID, that Mortado woman that just won the Nobel Peace Prize, bought and paid for by USAID. She was trained. Her organization that she created, Sumatra or something like that, was actually funded by USAID/CIA.
Really?
Same thing with Juan Guaido, 100% funded. That whole coup that was run during Trump's first administration by Mike Pompeo and John Bolton and a guy, hold on a second, what's his name? I can't believe I'm going to forget it. Elliot Abrams. Elliot Abrams is a convicted felon who ran part of the Iran-Contra scandal out of Reagan's National Security Council and was pardoned later. Okay, so Bush was running Iran-Contra as vice president. Yeah. Bush, the president, in like 1990 something, pardoned Elliot Abrams for his conviction in Iran-Contra. Weirdly enough. And so Elliot Abrams is front and center in the coup in 2019, working for John Bolton in Venezuela. So again, these characters just come up over and over again. And of course, we have John Bolton on television saying that he overthrows foreign governments. Right. He just blatantly admitted it. So, there's a lot more to Venezuela. And if you know anything about the drug networks, you know the drugs don't originate in Venezuela. They originate in Colombia. The plants in Bolivia and Peru has had some manufacturing capability, but the bulk of the manufacturing capability comes from Colombia. They do use corrupt people in Venezuela to run drugs through there. There's a coastline along Venezuela and Guyana that is very active as far as, and we've overthrown Guyana too, because of course we did. And so there's activity there, but I think it has more to do. And Maduro just came out in the last day and said that he couldn't possibly be a dictator because he didn't graduate from the School of Americas, which is where Pinochet and all of the dictators. I just laughed my butt off because every single military dictator, that Noriega, all of them that the CIA installed throughout Latin America were all graduates of the School of America. And so I just laughed, and most people wouldn't even get the joke, but he's absolutely right. He was not part of the in crowd. So I find that very interesting. And a lot of people are having trouble processing Trump pardoning, what's his name? Hernandez. I think the former Honduras president that he just pardoned.
Oh, yeah.
Because supposedly he trafficked all of this cocaine into the United States. Actually, if you go back and look at the transcripts of the evidence, all of the evidence presented against him was basically regurgitated from his brother's conviction that had happened a few years before his, and the actual witnesses at his trial were all given either complete commutation of their sentences or like 20 years off of their sentences. So basically they were buying fake testimony to convict him. And that's basically what Trump came out and said. What most people don't realize is this guy, the former president of Honduras, had for the first time ever signed an extradition treaty with the United States and had extradited tons of drug people into the United States to stand trial. And he was one of the lone heads of state in Latin America that refused to participate in human trafficking.
Wow.
So,
What a crazy web of information. And you have added so many parts to my story. I mean, because I haven't heard you before, so to me it's a bit of an overload to get all of this information. It's amazing to have someone, you know, with your knowledge and obviously the years of information that you've soaked up. I do appreciate that. So these spaces that you do must be really quite extraordinary. And
well, basically we do book reviews. I've read over 120 books and on just this subject. So the beauty of doing that, like we're doing the Mafia, CIA, and George Bush right now, the beauty of going through these books with all of this background knowledge is that we can tie a lot of pieces. Like this book is basically about the Mafia and the CIA being involved in the 1980s bank failures with the savings and loan. But because we know all of the Iran-Contra stuff, that because we did Gary Webb's book, Dark Alliance, a couple of books ago, we're able to bring all of that information into the book as we go through the book. And so you're getting like a massive history lesson of 120 books with one book.
You know, you bring up a great point that I say to a lot of people when I'm talking to them. I'm not an expert on much, but I am really learning from the guests that I have. It's so extraordinary. I've garnered so much information from talking to people like you. One of the things, though, that I've realized over my years is that you don't know history, and you're definitely bound to repeat it. And we're definitely seeing that. I'm sure throughout the states. Florida is an exception. I think, you know, it's a fantastic place to be, as far as I can tell, in regard to freedom. Where I live, though, you know, we have propagandized most of our people to believe the government and the lying media, and they really truly have removed history so that people are, and I hate to say this, but they're dumb, and they really choose not to look at history on their own. And unfortunately, that's why we're here in this situation in a lot of places.
So I learned a long time ago, there's a big difference between ignorant and stupid. Ignorant is a lack of knowledge. People are ignorant. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid is when you know the truth and
Yes.
you either refuse to believe it, or you continue on the same path with the information. That's stupid.
Yeah.
We are ignorant of our history because our history has been hidden from us.
Well, I'm starting to call out my own, because we allowed this to happen in my part of the world. We allowed our education to be so poor, and we allowed our politicians to obfuscate the truth and to make up rules that only help them, and and punish the people that actually pay their salaries.
Correct.
So I've started to, instead of being a bit of a victim, I've started to call out my own, like, I'm guilty of this myself, for sure.
I was too. I had no idea any of this stuff was true.
Yeah. It's just been such an eye-opening adventure. To me, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but to me, when I started to look into 9/11, that was kind of my burgeoning awakening. For you?
No. As a matter of fact, on 9/11, I was sitting at U.S. Central Command at MacDill Air Force Base. I was a fairly new lieutenant colonel, and it would have never dawned on me that my own government would do that. Had no idea.
Yeah.
But again, after 9/11 happened, we went to war. And CENTCOM was the wartime commander. So immediately we started working 20 hours a day. We were sleeping on cots underneath our desk, barely got to come home at all. And that continued for me until 2002 when I went to Air War College. But the military keeps you running so fast, and
Right.
you're getting lots of information. None of it happens to be true. But we had the CIA sitting in the command post. We had the FBI there, and they're feeding the intelligence to the 4-star general that they want him to have.
Yes.
So it's almost impossible in real time if you don't know all of the stuff that I just conveyed to you.
Yeah.
As a military officer. Again, why would you be serving if you think your government is corrupt? You wouldn't.
Well, you wouldn't.
You are so indoctrinated into believing that the government is not nefarious. And again, until I had read some of the stuff that came out in the 1970s about the CIA, didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. I knew the guy. I'd sat in the staff meeting next to the CIA guy. That was the liaison with CENTCOM. And again, you just think everybody's there for their country.
Right.
And that simply is not the case.
When you tell me that story, and what you went through, obviously, during 9/11, and by the way, to make sure that you understand and my viewers understand, it wasn't 9/11 specifically that made me wake up. It was many years after, when there was other people that were investigating and saying, oh, by the way, building 7, by the way, this and this and this, and I was like, oh,
yes,
okay, that doesn't make sense, right?
Yes.
But I totally get it when you say, that when you're in the thick of it, of course, you're in war and you don't have time to consider it. This actually makes me think of something that just happened recently. Can you speak briefly about the Seditious Six and what that means to somebody like yourself with a military background?
So basically what they're saying, and this goes back to the 51 intelligence officials saying it has the hallmark of Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
If you pay attention to their actual words, not what we think they mean, but their
Yes.
actual words. The very first time I heard it has the hallmarks of, I knew immediately they were lying.
Right.
If it was, so these are 51 intelligence officials. And once you're in the CIA, you're never a former CIA. You keep your security clearance.
You're always
They knew
CIA.
damn good and well what was and wasn't Russian disinformation. So when they used the word hallmarks, I knew immediately they were lying. So when you look at what the seditious six did, there's every officer, every enlisted person, and I was both, I was enlisted and an officer. We know what the rules of armed conflict is. We know what's a lawful and unlawful order. They were beginning a narrative. And it just so happens that that narrative of making sure that you don't obey illegal orders. Now, these same six people stood by and didn't say a word about an actual illegal order that was issued on all United States military members to be experimented on with a COVID quote unquote vaccine that they had to change the definition of vaccine in order for it to even fit in there. And it was experimental. We are not allowed to be mandated any experimental medication because in the past, the US government has experimented on military people. And that's absolutely forbidden. And that's exactly what they did. And those son of a bitches didn't say a word.
No.
So these are the same people. Oh, and they exempted themselves from it.
Right. Right. Of course they did.
Yeah. So they know what a legal and illegal order is. They stood by while an actual illegal order was given and didn't say a word. They violated their oath twice when they were a military person, for some of them, or an intelligence person, and when they became a congressman. So when they stand up and say, basically, if you're given an illegal order, we're here for you. Bullshit. You weren't there for any of the people that were thrown out of the military for standing up against an actual illegal order. You laughed at them.
Or excoriated them, right? I mean,
yes, they called them horrific things. So what they were doing was planting a seed in military members' minds that, holy crap, we have an executive branch that's going to be giving us illegal orders. We better be on our guard. And then what happens immediately after that is there's the accusation that Pete Hegseth issued an illegal order with a second shot to kill people on that drug boat. So now their entire psyops has been exposed. The reason why they gave that order is because anything that comes up that they're now going to classify as an illegal order, they're going to get people in the military. There's a billboard outside of Fort Bragg where JSOC is, where
I saw that.
Yes. So this is a full court press to turn the military against the commander in chief.
It was well, there's a number of people that have talked about these are the steps of a color revolution.
Correct.
There was a young woman who really managed to summarize this thought in I think about 3.5 minutes. And you've probably seen her. She was so good at explaining how the color revolutions work and how it tied back to exactly what's happening in the United States with the seditious six. I was just looking for the clip and I couldn't find one, but I appreciate you explaining that.
Yeah, and let me just say this. I think the word color revolution is part of a psyops as well. They're actual coups. We're undergoing a coup.
Coup d'etat.
And the reason why several years ago they started calling these coups that they were orchestrating color revolutions is because if you go on the web and you look up color revolutions, you're going to find a handful.
Right.
If you go on the web and you look up CIA coups, you're going to find at least 70, 80 of
Yes.
them.
Yes.
They're exactly the same thing.
Isn't
But
that
if you
interesting?
control the words, you can actually control people's behavior and what they know. And so I always push back, not to correct you, because I know that's the
No,
word
please do.
everyone's
Yeah.
using. But I don't ever refer to them as color revolutions. They're CIA coups, and the CIA is behind this one.
You just reminded me, again, I'm opening up a can of worms and going down the rabbit hole, and I'd love to talk to you longer about all of this stuff. But there's so much evidence that this past presidency, and probably many others, Obama for sure was a corrupt piece of garbage, but they would on purpose change the lettering of spelling on documents so that you couldn't actually look
Yes.
up
You can't
certain
do word
things.
searches.
You can't do FOIP searches, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so dirty and evil. These people, I don't have the right words for it, Colonel, but it just seems like the level of evil is
Satanically evil.
because they're not human. I mean, most people have a level of
Common decency.
common decency or common sense, or I'm with my neighbor, with my family, like these are normal people that I have to treat like a normal human being, but I
Mhm.
don't think that they're even human from what I can tell.
That's why I refer to them as satanically evil,
Mm.
because the only level of evil that replicates the actions of these people is Satan.
I don't.
That's how
I
I mean,
completely agree.
the transgenderism, every part of what they do and what they believe in is
Yeah.
satanically evil.
Do you mind if I just share something I posted today? Because I think
Oh, go ahead.
it's relevant to what we're talking about right now. I'm just going to quickly look it up here. So stand by and talk amongst yourselves here for a second.
There's just me.
So I'm just going to pull it up here. 1 second. It was something. So what I did was I went to one of my favorite AI. I don't use AI a lot, but I do like Mike Adams' AI. I don't know if you've ever used it, but it's called Enoch, and it really has, it's unleashed, and it is fed really good information where it's not, suppressed and really focused on woke ideology or stuff like that. Anyway,
I had somebody accuse me a couple of days ago on X. They asked me if I knew someone, a guy that had, he'd been part of a special operations, and they were basically being an ass and said, yeah, I'm sure you don't even know this guy or this guy or this guy. And I know you don't know this guy. And the guy happened to have written a book that I had. So I walked into my office and I had a book, and I took a picture of the book laying on my couch. And their response was, that's not real. I'm sure that's AI. And I'm like, you idiot. I don't even know how to use AI.
you
I don't
doofus.
use AI. Sure,
Oh
that's
my gosh.
AI. It's my
Yeah.
couch.
Okay, so stand by. This is what I posted today. What I did was I asked it, and you might like this. Hang on 1 second. I'm just going to try and zoom in a bit here. I asked Mike Adams, brighteon.com AI, how the globalists plan to pull it off. Globalists plan, and this is from the AI, it says globalists plan to implement a one world government, a summary. Based on the information provided, globalists aim to establish a one world government through a phased approach, targeting key aspects of society, consolidate power and control. Their plan involves several interconnected strategies, centralization of money supply, establish a global digital currency like central bank digital currency to replace physical cash and traditional banking systems, implement a universal basic income system funneled through digital wallets to control access to funds and restrict purchases, control over control over resources, food and energy, seize control of global resources, food production, energy, infrastructure, likely through international, yeah, through international treaties and regulations, impose global quotas and rationing on essential goods and services, including food, energy, and commodities, centralized control over human labor, implement global labor regulations and standards to control the movement and employment of workers, enforce a global social credit system monitoring and controlling individual behavior and access to opportunities, transition to a one world government, promote regional governance bodies such as the EU as stepping stones towards a global governance structure, weaken national governments through international agreements, open borders, and globalist agendas like the Great Reset. Anyway, I'm not going to read the rest of it, but you get the idea.
Everything that you just read, with the exception of the digitization, is the Fabian Society's plan that was published in the late 1800s.
So Club of Rome, is
all
that
part of it?
All part of that too, yeah.
Same people that, if you trace the Fabian Society, as a matter of fact, let me grab this book right here. I'm reading this book right now. This guy did a great job.
Masters of Conspiracy Exposed. Is that what it said?
Yes. The Fabian Society, the Masters of the Conspiracy Exposed. It's an excellent book. Cynthia Chung wrote a book called The Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Sets. She puts the whole thing in context as well. Excellent book. She's from, she lives in Canada with Matt Errett.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know Matt. Yeah.
Okay. So Cynthia is his wife. She is one of the first books. If you go to my Rumble channel, one of the very first books I did. So if you go on a laptop to the Colonel's Corner on Rumble, there's you hit playlist and there's little tiles. And in the tiles, if you click on them, it'll drop down and there will be like 20 episodes, part 1 through 20 of her book, The Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Sets. And basically I had read probably I read her book very early on. So I'd probably read about 10, 15 books at that point. And I just kind of tied in Gladio to my review of her book. But yes, that's it exactly. And so there's different covers for each book that we do. Did you hit playlist?
No, I haven't yet, but I can go to playlist. Yeah.
So then you can go down and you'll see the tiles for the different books. And underneath each book is like the series of episodes for that book.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so it basically just takes you through that book. And a lot of people don't like to read. They like listening and, like on their way to work or something like that. Yeah. I had a guy, every 2 months, we have a Patriot meetup here in Central Florida. And I had a guy come up to me at the last one we had, and he's like, "Oh my God, I'm binge watching every one of your shows." So, because again, once you realize what this structure is and how all of this stuff ties together, it does become addictive to kind of reprogramming yourself into reality as opposed to the matrix that you've been living in.
Wow, you're such a huge find. This is a gold mine of information, and I'm so excited that I had a chance to talk to you.
I'm glad you reached out.
Yeah, I think this has been an amazing episode, an amazing opportunity to talk to you. I am so grateful that we had this opportunity. Do you mind leaving, if you have one other thing that you want to say to the audience before we head off? I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody.
If you guys want more of this information, just visit the Colonel's Corner on Rumble. Show up at the 4 o'clock. All of my spaces are recorded. If you go to my X, I have a overview video that you can share with your friends and family. It's the very first thing on my pinned post. If you go to my X profile, there's a little drop down, see more thing. It has a link to all of the saved. We have a guy in Sweden that takes all of my spaces and puts them in a box link on Google.
Mm.
I don't know if you can see. Let me grab my glasses here.
I've got Gladio spaces right here. Yeah.
Yeah, so that video
threads.
down there,
Yeah.
that's basically my Gladio 101. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you go to where it says the spaces,
Yeah.
that has a box that has like we've done hundreds of them.
Fantastic.
But
Yeah.
it's a duplicate. I do a few other shows that are just like open mic shows and stuff like that. But the spaces is basically duplicated on my Rumble channel. It's just much easier if you just want to do the book reviews.
Right.
It's easier to get that on Rumble.
Yeah, spaces are a great way to attract people to find out what you're up to, and obviously it's a great way to connect with viewers, because I don't do spaces, but I don't have a lot of extra time.
We have a lot of really interesting people. We have a reformed Wall Street banker that joins us all the time. We have another guy that has been in insurance and banking from Illinois called Illini. I love him to death. He's listened to all of the Nixon tapes. We have a plethora of very, very smart people that come into those spaces. And a former, I don't know if he's still teaching history from New York. So there's a lot of information besides what we bring to you in. And so I do an hour presentation in all of my spaces, and then we open it up for everybody to talk about the material that we just covered.
Oh, nice.
It's fascinating.
You are fascinating. You know what? I appreciate you and what you bring to the world. So God bless you. Thank you so much for doing it. Yeah. All right. I'm just going to say goodbye. If you don't mind, we'll have 10 seconds to catch up after this. Is that okay?
Okay. Sure.
Okay, fantastic. God bless you all. Thank you so much for being here. If you are still watching, make sure to get this out to more eyeballs. We need to share this out. Share it, share it, share it. Get it out to your social media. Get it out to your friends and family. You know what to do. Keep your head on a swivel. Let's stay sane together, everyone. This is Bruce, and I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate your participation in freedom in Canada. Share this information and help others to wake up. God bless.